Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into something I know resonates with a lot of you, that really frustrating, kind of stubborn weight.
Yeah.
The kind that just refuses to budge, even when you feel like you're hitting the gym, watching what you eat, doing all the quote-unquote right things.
Right. It's like your body's playing by a completely different rule book, isn't it?
Exactly.
And, well, the sources we've been looking at for this deep dive really suggest it's often not just about, calories in, calories out, or sheer willpower.
Mm-hmm.
They point towards some pretty powerful hidden factors,
Mm.
things like hormones and the health of your gut, stuff going on silently in the background.
Okay, so that's our mission for this deep dive then. We're going to unpack what your sources say about these, frankly, complex ideas.
No, try to make them make sense.
And help you spot maybe some potential signs that these things might be affecting you. And importantly, explore what the sources suggest in terms of like lifestyle tweaks or nutrition changes that could actually help.
It's about getting a different angle on weight challenges, maybe a more complete picture.
Absolutely.
But, and this is really crucial, we have to say this up front, everything we talk about today, it's for general learning, general education.
Good point.
It is absolutely not medical advice. Please, please don't use this to self-diagnose or replace seeing a qualified healthcare professional.
Definitely. If you're worried about anything or think you might have an underlying issue, talk to your doctor. Get personalized advice.
Exactly. Always the best first step.
Okay, crystal clear. So let's dive in. The sources talk about something pretty fundamental, a real challenge many people face, this yo-yo effect.
Ah, yes, the dreaded yo-yo. The sources describe it as, well, the body's tendency to pile the weight back on, sometimes even more, after you stop a diet.
That cycle of losing, then gaining it all back, so frustrating.
Utterly demoralizing.
Mm.
And the sources explain why it happens. It's a mix of things. Energy balance gets thrown off, hormones shift. There are psychological factors too.
So how does that cycle actually work according to the sources?
Well, what they outline is something like this. You cut calories, or maybe carbs, really drastically, right? To lose weight fast.
Yeah.
But that can make your blood sugar tank.
Yeah.
And sometimes your body even starts breaking down muscle for energy if it's not done right, which then triggers this intense primal hunger, cravings like you wouldn't believe.
The body's basically screaming for fuel.
Precisely. It's an alarm bell. And when you're hit with that level of hunger, it's really easy to, well, overeat, often grabbing foods high in those quick carbs or sugars.
Because that's what your body is demanding.
Yes. And the sources say this sudden flood of energy, especially after that period of restriction, causes this massive spike in blood sugar.
Yeah.
Your body, thinking famine's over, feast time, is primed to store all that incoming energy.
Mostly as fat.
Mostly as fat, yeah, leading you right back to where you started, or sometimes even heavier.
Oof. So avoiding that dramatic swing is key.
That's what the sources really hammer home. Keeping blood sugar stable is foundational to breaking that cycle. They contrast stable versus fluctuating blood sugar quite starkly.
How so?
Well, stable blood sugar helps your body access and burn fat more efficiently. It helps protect your muscle mass, which is metabolically active. It dials down those crazy hunger signals and cravings, and it keeps your energy levels steadier.
So it stops that reactive pattern before it starts?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
It helps you get off the yo-yo.
That focus on blood sugar, not just calories, feels like a really important takeaway already. Now, you mentioned internal systems. Let's talk hormones. We hear that term a lot, but the sources really frame them as these incredibly powerful chemical messengers, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're produced by your endocrine glands, and they're essentially directing traffic for almost everything your body does. Tiny amounts. Huge impact.
And the sources link specific hormones very directly to weight, don't they?
Very directly. Several hormones pop up again and again in the sources as major players in weight control, and even where your body decides to store fat.
Okay, which ones are we talking about?
Well, a really big one the sources focus on is insulin, produced by the pancreas. Now, most people know it helps get glucose, sugar from your blood into your cells for energy.
Right.
But the sources highlight its other major role, energy storage. They actually call it a fat-storing hormone.
Fat storing hormone.
Yeah, because it basically tells your body, store this energy as fat.
Mm.
And crucially, it also puts the brakes on your body's ability to burn stored fat.
So if insulin levels are high, it's physically harder to burn fat.
That's exactly what the sources say.
All right.
And they explain how eating a lot of sugar and refined carbs constantly can lead to something called insulin resistance.
I've heard of that.
Right. Your cells basically start ignoring insulin signal. So the pancreas has to pump out more and more insulin to try and get the job done.
Ah, okay.
And these chronically high insulin levels, they mean more fat storage, particularly that stubborn fat around the abdomen, and it makes tapping into your fat reserves really difficult. High insulin can also mess with leptin, the hormone that's supposed to tell your brain you're full.
Wow, okay. So insulin's a major piece. What about cortisol, the stress hormone?
Yep, cortisol from your adrenal glands. It's vital for your fight or flight response, totally necessary in short bursts.
For emergencies.
Exactly. But the problem, as the sources, including insights from the Mayo Clinic, point out, is chronic stress. You know, the day in, day out pressure, lack of sleep, emotional stuff that keeps cortisol levels high all the time.
And the Mayo Clinic source said that keeps that stress response constantly on.
Yeah, constantly on, disrupting all sorts of body processes and increasing the risk for health problems, very much including weight gain.
And how does high cortisol directly lead to weight gain, according to the sources?
Well, it actively encourages your body to store fat, especially, again, around the belly.
The dreaded belly fat.
Seems to be a theme, doesn't it? And it also ramps up cravings for those high-calorie comfort foods, think sugary, fatty things.
Ah, the stress-eating connection.
Precisely. So cortisol is promoting fat storage and making you want the very foods that fuel it. It's a bit of a double whammy.
That makes a lot of sense, unfortunately. What about thyroid hormones? They run the metabolism, right?
They're the metabolic masterminds, yeah. Produced by your thyroid gland. T3 and T4, they basically set the speed for how quickly your body burns energy just existing.
Your basal metabolic rate.
Exactly. So if your thyroid is overactive, hyperthyroidism, your metabolism speeds way up, often causing weight loss. But the source is really focused on the flip side, hypothyroidism, where you don't have enough thyroid hormone.
That slows everything down.
Significantly slows down your metabolism. This makes gaining weight easier and losing fat much, much harder. Often comes with feeling tired all the time, feeling cold, dry skin, those kinds of things.
So thyroid health is directly tied to your baseline calorie burn.
Absolutely. Then you've got the sex hormones, like estrogen and testosterone. Estrogen mainly from ovaries and adrenals, but also fat cells themselves produce some, it's really important for metabolic health too.
In both men and women.
In both, yeah, though levels differ. The sources indicate that imbalances, both too high or too low, can be linked to weight gain. They specifically mention the drop in estrogen during menopause.
Right.
And also, just as men get older, contributing to more fat settling around the middle.
Okay. And testosterone.
Testosterone, primarily from testes and adrenals, plus a bit from ovaries, is generally linked to things like burning fat, building muscle, having energy. So the sources suggest lower levels can make weight management tougher.
It really does sound like this incredibly complex hormonal orchestra.
That's a great way to put it.
And if one section is off-key, it affects the whole performance, including your weight. The sources even link different body shapes to these hormones, right? Like where you store fat.
They do mention that, the sort of apple shape where fat gathers more above the waist. The sources often link that pattern to imbalances in insulin, cortisol, and maybe estrogen.
And the pear shape.
Fat more below the waist, hips, thighs. That's seen as potentially more influenced by insulin function, according to the sources. It just shows how hormones can dictate not just if you store fat, but where.
And it gets even trickier because the sources say obesity itself can actually cause hormone problems.
It can definitely become a vicious cycle. The sources note that when someone carries significant excess weight, the body's normal signaling can get scrambled. For instance, ghrelin, that's the hormone that makes you feel hungry.
Yeah.
It might not decrease after eating as much as it should in someone with obesity.
Yeah.
So you don't get that stop eating signal as strongly.
You still feel hungry even after a meal.
Potentially, yes. And then there's leptin resistance, which we touched on with insulin. Leptin comes from fat cells. It's supposed to tell your brain, hey, we've got enough energy stored. You can stop eating now.
The fullness signal.
Exactly. But the sources mention that in obesity, sometimes a protein interferes, or the brain just becomes less sensitive to leptin, so the brain doesn't get the message, even though there are plenty of fat stores. It keeps thinking you're starving.
Wow. The body's essentially deaf to the I'm full signal.
That's a good analogy. And And of course, obesity itself strongly contributes to that insulin resistance we talked about, which just encourages more fat storage.
It really feels like a feedback loop. And then the sources point out how our modern lifestyles almost seem perfectly designed to mess up these delicate hormone systems.
It does seem that way sometimes, unfortunately. Lack of sleep is a huge one the sources consistently flag.
Just not getting enough hours.
Yeah, not hitting that sweet spot of, say, 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep. It negatively impacts multiple key weight-related hormones, leptin, ghrelin, cortisol, and it directly makes your body less sensitive to insulin.
So being sleep deprived literally makes you hungrier, more stressed, and worse at handling carbs.
That's a pretty accurate summary of the ripple effect described in the sources, yeah. And then there's chronic stress again. We keep coming back to it because it's so important.
That constant high cortisol.
Right. Which, as the Mayo Clinic and other sources highlight, fuels insulin resistance, keeps blood sugar higher, and drives those cravings for fatty, sugary foods.
Which then provides the fuel for the fat storage cortisol is promoting.
Exactly. It's a nasty cycle, heavily influenced by our stress levels.
And, maybe least surprising, a high-sugar diet is a direct hit.
Oh, yeah. The sources are really clear on this link. Lots of sugar means big insulin spikes. Insulin's job, store fat. So a diet consistently high in added sugars is just a direct route to messing up insulin balance and promoting fat gain. Simple as that, really.
Okay, hormones are clearly massive. But the sources also spend a lot of time on something else that feels, well, revolutionary in how we think about health, the gut microbiome.
It really is a paradigm shift. We're talking about the trillions of microbes, bacteria, fungi, viruses, you name it, living mostly in your large intestine.
It's still kind of mind-blowing that these tiny bugs have so much power over our weight.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
But the sources show their influence is, well, profound. For starters, a healthy, diverse gut microbiome is essential just for properly absorbing nutrients from your food.
So if your gut's off, you might not even be getting the full benefit of healthy food.
That's a possibility the sources raise, yeah.
Yeah.
You might not be extracting all the goodness.
And what about inflammation?
That's a huge connection. An imbalanced gut, often called dysbiosis, is a major source of low-grade chronic inflammation throughout the body.
Okay.
And the sources strongly link this chronic inflammation to things like insulin resistance and making fat loss significantly harder. It kind of gums up the metabolic works.
So a troubled gut fuels inflammation, which then messes with hormones and metabolism.
You got it. It's all interconnected. Plus, the specific types of bacteria you have can actually influence how many calories you absorb from food.
Really?
Yeah. And even whether your body is more likely to store energy as fat or burn it, it's not just what you eat, it's what your internal ecosystem does with it.
That's fascinating. And they even communicate with our brain about appetite.
Absolutely. The gut produces hormones and neurotransmitters that talk directly to your brain, the gut-brain axis. This communication influences hunger signals, fullness cues, even cravings.
So an unhealthy gut could mess up those signals.
Definitely. It can make it much harder to tune into your body's actual needs. The Harvard source and others really emphasize how vital research into this microbiome obesity inflammation connection is for public health right now.
This really does paint a much, much bigger picture than just eat less, move more. So if someone's listening and feeling that deep frustration with stubborn weight, what are some potential signs the sources suggest might point towards hormones or gut health being involved?
Well, the sources list several common things to maybe be aware of.
Yeah.
And again, just to stress, these are clues, not a diagnosis, right?
Right, just things to notice. What are some key ones?
Okay, so persistent fatigue is a big one. Feeling tired even when you think you're getting enough sleep. Obviously, the main thing is difficulty losing weight or maybe gaining weight without really changing habits. That's the trigger for looking deeper usually.
And the belly fat thing.
Yes, increased abdominal fat, especially if it's new or feels out of proportion, is often highlighted as potentially linked to those hormonal patterns. Insulin, cortisol, estrogen.
And those intense cravings we talked about earlier.
Definitely. Constant or really strong cravings, particularly for sugar or carbs, are frequently mentioned in the sources as possibly related to blood sugar issues or high cortisol.
Makes sense.
Then digestive problems are kind of the classic signs of potential gut imbalance, things like regular bloating, gas, constipation, diarrhea, just general discomfort after eating.
The sources also mention things like mood swings or anxiety.
Yeah, that links back to the gut-brain axis again. An out-of-whack gut can influence neurotransmitters, potentially contributing to feeling more anxious or irritable, according to the sources.
Interesting.
And finally, some more specific physical signs like maybe unusual hair loss, really dry skin, or feeling cold all the time could potentially point towards needing to check thyroid function.
That's a really useful list just for self-awareness. And the sources are clear. If several of these things are ringing bells for you, it's a really good reason to explore it further.
Absolutely. Ideally with a healthcare professional who can actually run tests and see what's going on.
For sure, understanding is one thing, getting proper assessment is another.
Exactly.
So, okay, let's shift to solutions. Beyond the standard weight loss advice, what strategies do the sources suggest to actually support hormone balance and gut health to kind of optimize that internal environment?
Right. This is where we get practical. And the sources really emphasize strategies that nourish these underlying systems. Sleep is number one. Absolutely foundational.
Getting those 7 to 9 hours consistently.
Yes. Because sleep impacts so many of these hormones.
Yeah.
The sources offer tips like sticking to a regular sleep schedule, even on weekends, if possible.
Aligning with your body clock.
Exactly. Also, avoiding eating or drinking especially sugary things, caffeine, alcohol, even fizzy drinks for maybe 3 or 4 hours before bed.
Yeah.
And limiting screen time before sleep, making sure your bedroom is dark, quiet, cool, the usual sleep hygiene stuff.
Okay. And managing stress. Given that cortisol link, that sounds crucial too.
Non-negotiable, really, for hormone balance. The sources stress finding and practicing stress reduction techniques that work for you.
Like what?
Things like meditation, deep breathing, just spending quiet time in nature, going for walks, maybe consciously setting more realistic expectations for yourself.
Yeah.
Connecting with positive, supportive people. Using exercise as a stress reliever, not just a calorie burn. Identifying the root causes of stress where possible. The Mayo Clinic advice aligns here too. Find healthy ways to cope.
And avoid the unhealthy ones like excess drinking or emotional eating.
Exactly. That's key. Find constructive outlets instead.
Okay. Diet is obviously still huge, but the focus shifts, right?
Big shift. It's less about just counting calories and much more about the quality of food to support your hormones and your gut bugs.
So whole foods.
Whole, unprocessed foods are king, according to the sources. Lots of fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, healthy fats. This provides the nutrients for hormone production and feeds those beneficial gut bacteria. And definitely limiting, or better yet, avoiding refined sugars and processed carbs. Sugary drinks are a big no-no in the sources.
And fiber for the gut. You mentioned that earlier.
Critically important. Fiber from diverse plant sources, fruits, veggies, legumes, whole grains, acts as prebiotic fuel for your good gut bacteria. Helps them thrive. Plus, it helps you feel full and keeps digestion moving.
What about things like yogurt or kimchi, fermented foods?
Good question. The sources often recommend including fermented foods. Things like live culture yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi. They provide probiotics, which are live beneficial bacteria that can help support gut diversity and health.
Okay. And protein and healthy fats.
Essential. Protein helps with satiety, keeping you full, and provides building blocks for hormones. Healthy fats are also crucial for hormone production. So the sources suggest including quality protein at meals, eggs, fish, chicken, beans, nuts.
Any specific timing tips?
Some sources suggest eating protein at breakfast, maybe within an hour of waking up. Another tip is finishing your last meal at least 3 hours before bed, giving your digestion a break overnight, and incorporating healthy fats like avocado, nuts, seeds, olive oil. Some sources also float the idea of smaller, more frequent meals, maybe every 3-4 hours, to help keep blood sugar stable.
Interesting. And exercise. It's not about punishing workouts.
No, the emphasis is much more on gentle consistency. Regular, moderate exercise is fantastic for metabolic health, insulin sensitivity, stress relief.
But not overdoing it.
Exactly. The sources warn against overtraining. Really intense, prolonged workouts without enough recovery can actually spike cortisol, which is counterproductive. So aim for that moderate intensity range, like brisk walking, cycling, swimming maybe 150 to 300 minutes a week. Or if you do higher intensity, maybe 75 to 150 minutes, and just increase gradually.
And moving throughout the day.
Yes, that's another big point. Don't just rely on a workout session. Break up sitting time. Get up and walk around for at least 5 minutes every half hour if you can. Aim to increase your daily step count. Aiming for somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 steps is often suggested.
So it's about weaving movement into your whole day.
Exactly. And finally, the sources touch on mindset, which is huge.
How so?
Things like really tuning into your body's hunger and fullness signals. Learning how to build balanced meals that satisfy you. seeking support when you need it, focusing on how exercise makes you feel stronger, more energetic, not just the calories, finding ways to be active anywhere, knowing your strengths, anticipating obstacles, and importantly, celebrating your progress along the way.
That's a really holistic approach, covers so much ground. And just to reiterate, the sources strongly advise getting professional help if you suspect real imbalances.
Absolutely. Cannot stress that enough. If things feel really off, or if you have several of the signs we talked about, please see a doctor, maybe an endocrinologist for hormones, or perhaps a functional medicine practitioner who looks at the whole system. Get tested. Get personalized advice.
Right. Okay, well, bringing this all together, it really feels like understanding this connection, hormones, gut health, lifestyle, it offers such a different, potentially more empowering way to look at that stubborn weight issue.
It really does shift the perspective, doesn't it? Away from just blaming yourself or thinking it's only about willpower,
Yeah.
and more towards understanding and optimizing your body's incredibly complex internal environment, creating conditions where a healthy weight is, a more natural result of having a body that's functioning well and in balance.
This has been incredibly enlightening. Thank you for unpacking all that from your sources.
My pleasure. And I suppose the concluding thought is maybe true wellness, sustainable weight management, it's really about working with your body's intricate systems, understanding them, supporting them, not constantly fighting against them.
That's a fantastic way to put it. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We really hope this gives you, our listeners, some valuable insights and maybe a new perspective if you've been struggling with stubborn weight.
We hope so. Take these ideas, reflect on them, and if anything really resonated, please have that conversation with a healthcare professional.
Definitely. And maybe here's a final thought to chew on as you go about your day. Considering just how much things like chronic stress, not enough sleep, and the state of our gut can influence our hormones and our weight, how much of what we often call a lack of willpower might actually be our biology just responding quite logically to the intense pressures of modern life. Something to think about. Thanks for listening.